After William arrived and James fled, a convention parliament was hastily elected, which chose to give the crown to both William and Mary as joint monarchs. The Declaration of Rights given to them with the crown at the end of 1689 was modified to become the constitutional document known as the Bill of Rights. William formed a Privy Council of his own choosing by prerogative right, appointing Lord Halifax, who was not loyal to Whigs or Tories, and the Earl of Danby, who had arranged the marriage of William and Mary. There was a careful balance of Whigs and Tories, which unsurprisingly never commanded the respect of the House of Commons. The intention of this lecture is for you to decide how far Parliament became a partner in government between 1688 and 1701. What is meant by partner? In this case, it is if Parliament was included in the decision-making process and listened to and respected. Knowledge-wise, you'll be able to explain how the role of Parliament changed. Skills-wise, to be able to assess the changing nature of power distribution. And behaviourally, to evaluate two historians' interpretations of the Triennial Act. The Parliament of 1690 was made up of 225 Whigs and 206 Tories. The Whigs should have been the natural allies of William because of their progressiveness. However, William was suspicious of the Whigs believing some were in fact Republicans. As a result, William attempted to win over the Tories. A struggle for power developed between the Privy Council and Parliament, who wanted a commission to investigate government spending. Nevertheless, James II was amassing an army in Ireland to launch his attempt to reclaim the throne. James II's attempts will culminate in his defeat at the Battle of the Boyne in 1690, where William led his troops. When William took the throne, it was to help in his war against the French in defence of the Netherlands. The war has become known as the 9 Years' War between 1688 and 1697. However, during the conflict, William had issues closer to home as well. The Williamite War in Ireland between 1689 and 1691 started when James II held a parliament in Ireland and the Catholic gentry offered him their support. Over 80,000 soldiers fought on both sides. Historians have used this war as evidence that the Glorious Revolution was not a bloodless revolution. Back in London, due to the costs of the war in Ireland, the Whigs were able to set up a commission of accounts and attempt to control the expenditure of the war. William, in addition to Ireland, had issues in Scotland, where Scottish Catholics in the Highlands also supported James II's claim to the Scottish crown. The Jacobite risings happened between 1689 and 1692 in Scotland, and though James II was defeated, the desire to re-establish the Stuart dynasty will be a thorn in the side of the Hanoverians in the 18th century. The Williamite and Jacobite wars have a level of controversy around them. Some historians state they are extensions of the 9 Years' War and not part of the Glorious Revolution, because though James II is leading the armies, they are funded by France in their campaign against William as part of the 9 Years' War. The other argument is that the Williamite and Jacobite wars were reactionary to the Glorious Revolution, because it was James II attempting to reclaim his throne, and as a result the Glorious Revolution was not a bloodless revolution. Between 1692 and 1693, a group known as the Whig Junto became influential. They backed war in order to promote the Protestant cause in Europe and believed in a stronger parliament. The Junto were instrumental in pushing for a triennial bill to ensure regular parliaments as agreed in the Bill of Rights. However, in 1693, William used his veto to deny the bill passing into law. The Junto's domination of government grew, and in January 1694 the Triennial Act received royal assent. The result was an era of fervent electioneering between 1690 and 1715. The era has become referred to as the Ranger Party. With more regular elections and the lapsing of the Licensing Act of 1695, the political nation were better informed than ever, with a press which were no longer censored like it had been. Political pamphleteering and journalism now influenced 200,000 voters. William appeared to become more dependent on the Whig Junto in the Privy Council, and a tug-of-war between Privy Council and Parliament began on who was governing. The election of 1698 saw the distrust of the Whig Junto grow between the court and country factions within the parties. The court faction were loyal to the crown, while the country faction was made up of both Whigs and Tories who believed the court factions were corrupting politics. The attacks on the junta grew, and in 1698 the country faction were able to secure a bill which reduced the size of William's standing army to 7,000 and disbanded his personal Dutch guard. They also set up a commission to investigate the recipients of confiscated lands in Ireland. At this time it looked like Parliament were holding the reins. The Bill of Resumption stated that lands in Ireland which were granted to members of the Privy Council were illegal. This infuriated William. Originally the House of Lords blocked the bill, however they eventually stopped fighting it, which forced the king into giving it his royal assent. The election of 1701 saw Tories make gains, and they started their attack against key figures Somers, Montague and Russell. They were impeached by Parliament, however they were acquitted by their fellow parliamentarians. But how far by 1701 had Parliament become a partner in government? If the Glorious Revolution did not mean the parliamentary democracy of a constitutional monarchy, it most definitely was a move in the slow march of progress towards it. William needed money via parliamentary taxes to fight the French, and this gave Parliament the opportunity to increase control over William. The Triennial Act made Parliament a force William could not ignore. The argument in favour of a partnership in government is strong. Firstly, Parliament could now encroach on royal prerogative, with the appointment of ministers and control of the army being limited to 10,000 and then 7,000 men, and the disbanding of the Dutch Guard increased their presence in the governing of the country. Secondly, the Triennial Act enhanced the power Parliament had to give approval for a standing army to be kept in peacetime, and taxation without parliamentary consent was illegal. Of course, this was dependent on the Bill of Rights. Thirdly, the increase in power had much to do with the increase in responsibility. It was no longer just the money-raising institution that Charles I had refused to listen to. The monarchy now had no option but to work with Parliament. Fourthly, Bill of Rights gave guarantees that the abuses of power by James II were not possible anymore. Fifthly, the monarchy was not allowed to interfere with elections, and judges could not question the proceedings of Parliament. Parliamentary privilege was present. And finally, financial settlement, which will be looked at next time, meant the monarchy was dependent on Parliament for funds via the Civil List Act of 1697. The intention of this lecture was for you to decide how far Parliament became a partner in government between 1688 and 1701. But what was meant by partner? In this case, it is that Parliament was included in the decision-making process and listened to and respected, and hopefully you can see how this changed between 1688 and 1701. Knowledge-wise, you will now be able to explain how the role of Parliament changed. Skills-wise, in the associated materials you'll be able to assess the changing nature of power distribution. And behaviourally, in the associated materials you will evaluate two historians' interpretations of the Triennial Act.